Well, good morning. Welcome to Wesleyan University and our 2022 Founders Day celebration, marking our official 180th birthday. My name is Meg Rickman, and I proudly serve Wesleyan University as its Vice President for Enrollment, Marketing, and Communications. On behalf of the entire Wesleyan community, I offer my sincere appreciation to all of you for joining us today. A special welcome to our faculty and staff, our Board of Trustees, our community members, along with our regional, local, business, and educational leaders, our alumni, and parents and friends of the university. Most especially, I'd like to welcome our students. You are the reason Iowa Wesleyan exists today. We are so proud of you, and we are very glad you are here to celebrate this important day. It is tradition at Iowa Wesleyan that we gather every year on or around February 17th to commemorate the day when Iowa Wesleyan was founded. This place is rich in heritage and tradition, and it's fitting that we pause in community to honor those who had the foresight, courage, and stamina to build this most exceptional place. This historic founding of Iowa Wesleyan is rooted in the religious, educational, and cultural aspirations of early settlers in the frontier settlement of Mount Pleasant. Their aspirations were shaped by an impelling vision and a bold determination to build an institute of learning in the rapidly developing southeast corner of the Iowa Territory. On February 17, 1842, the territorial legislature granted a charter for the Mount Pleasant Literary Institute, Institute, later named the Mount Pleasant Collegiate Institute. Today, Iowa Wesleyan is a fully accredited, co-educational liberal arts university with a current undergraduate and graduate enrollment of over 750 students. The university is known for its diverse population of students in rural Iowa. Our 120 international students currently on campus hail from 35 countries around the globe. The university, which is committed to fostering a student-centered community and providing an accessible and affordable education, is also ranked as a top regional college in the Midwest. I believe our founders would certainly be proud of the institution we have become today. I have had the distinct honor and pleasure of working with two presidents during my tenure here at Iowa Wesleyan. However, our moderator today has worked with 8 presidents during her time here. Yes, you heard me right. Dr. Carol Nemitz is a graduate of Iowa Wesleyan, and she has served the institution in many capacities for many years. She began her higher education career at Iowa Wesleyan as the counselor for women and instructor of psychology in 1963, and thereafter as Dean of Women, Dean of Student Personnel Services, Assistant Professor of Psychology, Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students, and Vice President for Institutional Relations. From 2003 to 2013, Dr. Nemitz served as Special Assistant to the President and currently serves as the liaison to the International PEO Sisterhood. Dr. Nemitz received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Education from Iowa Wesleyan in 1956 and a Master of Arts degree in Counseling from the University of Iowa in 1960. On May 17, 2003, she was conferred with an honorary Doctorate of Humanities degree from Iowa Wesleyan. Carol, thank you for being our moderator today and welcome you to get this program started.
Thank you, Meg. I would like to extend my welcome to all of you for coming out for this historic event. At the present time, there are 5 former presidents who are living. 2 of them are able to be with us today. I'm not counting Chris as one of the 5. She's not a former, she's a current. Of the 3 who were unable to come, 1 dealt with health problems and 2 had other commitments. So they send their greetings to all of you, but were unable to join us at Iowa Wesleyan in the chapel today. First, I want to introduce to you Bill and Susan Johnston. Their bios of the presidents here are in your program. I'm not going to go through those. You can read those at your convenience. The Johnstons are retired and living in Friendsville, Maryland, with their 2 dogs, Painter and Rex. They live on what they say the mountain. To me, it's a rather small mountain, but they say it's a mountain home, so I don't want to insult them right up here in front of everyone. But it's not really what, it's sort of like Presley Saunders thinking that he built Mount Pleasant on a mount. That's somewhat similar for those of you who know that. But we're delighted that they drove in from Maryland yesterday and are with us today. Please welcome Bill and Susan Johnston. Our second former president is here, is Steve Titus, and his wife, Sarah. Sarah, they live in Omaha. However, Steve works out of Washington, D.C., and he has this fancy title of Executive Coaching Practice for Academic Search. And so afterwards, you can have him explain all that to you. Sarah's job, I understand, she is Director of Plan Giving and Stewardship at College of St. Mary's in Omaha. So welcome Steve and Sarah back to Mount Pleasant. Chris Plunkett arrived in Mount Pleasant in 2015. She was going to stay a year or two, and she came as Vice President for Finance and Treasurer. And as you know, she's never been able to get out of Mount Pleasant, even though she didn't intend to stay very long. The Board of Trustees appointed her as President of Iowa Wesleyan, the 30th President of Iowa Wesleyan in 2019, and she is the first female president of Iowa Wesleyan in our 180 years. Now, when she first arrived in Mount Pleasant, she brought a dog with her, Mocha. Didn't bring a husband, brought a dog, and just kept staying year after year. And finally, John Watson, her husband, apparently decided, well, she's not coming back to Vermont. I might as well retire and bring the other dog, Finnegan. So they arrived in Mount Pleasant and live in the presidential mansion out on East Washington. So let's give John and Chris a round of applause. I should add that John has a unique title at Iowa Wesleyan, and I'm going to share that with you. And it will be the first in the 180th year, and I'm assuming that the Board of Trustees will soon ask someone to make a medallion for this honor that John has. His official title is Keeper of the First Hound. That first hound being Finnegan. So let's get a medal made for him, and he deserves that. I'll tell you a story. Not that these two returning presidents, former presidents and the current president, needed help, but they were sent a list of possible questions that they would be asked. I don't know, I had nothing to do with it. I don't know whether the institution thought they weren't capable of thinking right off the bat. So anyway, they've had a chance to at least look at some of the questions and hopefully can share some of their experiences at Iowa Wesleyan as they serve this institution so well during their time. The first question that I'm going to raise is the most difficult one. And Bill, I'm going to start with you, then I'm going to jump to Steve, and then I'm going to come back to Chris. The first question is, what was the most difficult challenges you faced at Iowa Wesleyan?
Okay, Carol, thank you. Can you hear me okay? There we are. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for the invitation to be back here. Susan and I are, it's just wonderful to see so many people, so many great friends and that we've gotten to know over the years. So it's wonderful to be back in Mount Pleasant. Challenges. Students, I know there's some students out here. When I got here, of course, for students, the biggest challenge was food service, you know, what food you're going to eat, housing, things like that. So those were challenges that I heard from students. For us also, it was just after 9/11. And so for those that were living through that, you know what the experience was at that point in time for our country. It was a challenging time. It was a challenging time also then for us then as a college to attract students, because a number of students were not going to college at the time. Everybody was sort of holding back. So enrollment was one. Finances obviously are always a challenge. And then another item that was a challenge was the whole area of accreditation. The administrators and board members certainly are aware of that, how important it is to be accredited as an institution. And so we were working on that diligently. And you know, there are challenges to get through everything to be fully accredited. So those were some of our immediate things, Carol, that we were working on. And those challenges were with us for a few years, but we also made tremendous progress on both enrollment, finances, and then the academic side of things too.
Steve, what did you find as your most significant challenge?
That's a really good question. I think, and good morning, everyone. It's so great to be back. You know, it feels like so long ago, but yet it feels like yesterday. And just being on this very, very stage and just see so many familiar faces and people you love and people who love you. So it's great to be here. You know, the challenges is really an interesting thing, because always in the challenges are opportunities, you know, and what can we create from those? And I think what I remember the first 2 weeks, pretty difficult couple of weeks. And when we just got a sense of our enrollment picture and what that meant for us financially. And I think ultimately, though, what we did together is, I think the challenge was, how do we reimagine the future of this institution? I think that was the greatest challenge and really the opportunity and the invitation that was given to us in the midst of it. So in a way, Carol, I mean, part of it is, you know, in the challenge, the biggest challenge is how do we respond to it? And that's what I remember the most, is as a community, how we responded to what were pretty dire financial context that we were in. I mean, Chris, it was actually even better when you got here in 15, if you can imagine, because it was pretty bad then. And, you know, so I think the biggest challenge was, how do we reimagine the institution? How do we help the institution believe in itself maybe in a new way? And then how do we situate Iowa Wesleyan, then college, how do we situate it in a region of the state that really needed some help? You know, that Iowa Wesleyan was really a key strategic asset for Southeast Iowa. And so how do we come together and really identify that asset and then position it, situate it in the region in a way that really creates opportunity for the institution and for the students that are here, but also the people who work here and for the broader community. So that's how I think I would frame that.
Chris, had they solved all the challenges before you got here, before you were named president?
No, they're never solved, I think. Obviously for me, arriving as the CFO at a time when there were significant financial challenges, that was what I walked into. And that continues all the time. But I would say right now, if I think about the conversations I have with my colleagues in our cabinet meetings, I think the biggest challenge right now is simply not having any idea what's next. And there is no way to know the answer to that. When you read about what's going on in higher education across the country right now, there are so many rapidly changing demographics. There's a declining number of students going to college. There's an increasing number of students who want to have more online learning opportunities. There's financial challenges. And so right now we're really basking in 2 very incredible years with enrollment growth compared to what's happening nationally. And yet we never stop holding our breath because we know that we're always just a little ding away from something going in another direction, but we don't know what it might be. So it's that deep uncertainty, and how do you prepare for any of those eventualities?
Probably many of you in the audience think, oh, it must be great to be a president of an institution. Well, there are good days, and there are days not so good. An important role in the presidency is to have a spouse who can listen to you when you return home and when you're saying, oh, it was a wonderful day, and then the days that you drag in and you say you won't believe what the faculty did, or you won't believe what the students have done, and it wasn't a good day. So I'm going to turn to the spouses and the role that you played at Iowa Wesleyan. And we'll start with you, Sarah, and then we'll come over to Susan, and then John will let you have the final words as what does a good spouse do for the community and the institution and keep supporting the president of Iowa Wesleyan.
Thank you, Carol. So good to be with you all. Nice to see you. I always thought that, I still do, my most important work is to be Steve's partner, and however that showed up and whatever that meant. And part of that was being the mother that our children needed. So that was my first responsibility and continues to be so. But this community, Mount Pleasant, Iowa Wesleyan, there's just, I said it from the first time we met at dinner, several of us, and I said it, I still say it now. There's a really beautiful connection between the community and the university, and how the two work together and complement one another. So I saw my role as being, sometimes I said it was chief volunteer, sometimes I said it was #1 ambassador, but I saw my role as doing my part to connect the two, the city and the university. Did that through wonderful things like PEO, the Mansfield Symposium, 2 very special organizations, things that will live in my heart forever. And then I think I was very grateful for the opportunity to bring yoga to the campus, and we brought yoga to the general curriculum, but in a way that was so Mount Pleasant, because we opened those classes up to everyone. And some of you were in those classes, and it was life-giving to teach yoga to college students and members of the larger community. So, Carol, that's what I would say. That was how I saw my role.
Greetings, everybody. It's good to see you and wave to you. When we arrived in Mount Pleasant, everything was new to me. Bill had been a development officer at our previous place, and I understood the responsibility of somewhat of the community gathering and how important that was for the health and well-being and the goodwill for a college. So I looked at that as being a role I could do because it was part of who I was. I wasn't being someone else in trying to fulfill that role, and using whatever talents I had to, again, the same type of thing, connect the wonderful community of Mount Pleasant, all the history. I loved the Harlan Lincoln House. I was talking to somebody just recently about that, and the PEO history I love so much, and also as a visual artist, to be able to be involved in some of the arts and bringing friends that way to the community. When I think about the interesting role of a spouse, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily always a consoler or whatever for my husband. I had learned very early on not to ask him, what kind of day did you have, dear? Because he didn't really want to go through it all again. And so as he came home, if he wanted to tell me all of what happened, and then also on my part, if I heard something that upset me or I wanted to know about, I had to be very careful not to ask him about it, because maybe it would have even been handled way early and he had forgotten all about it. So it was one of those things where in dealing with our own communication and relationship, I needed to be very respectful and allow him to tell me what he wanted to say. But I was very careful to maintain my role and enjoy the community and meet people and make friends for the college on my own too. So,
John, what do you have to say on your role?
Greetings, everyone. Well, Carol, I'm afraid you already gave away my secret. My role as keeper of the first hound. But when I'm not tending to Finnegan, and more seriously, I'm going to pick up on something that Sarah mentioned, which is the role of the spouse, as I see it, is to be supportive. Before I retired and came to Mount Pleasant, I was self-employed. I ran several small computer software businesses. I did this for a very long time. I was used to calling the shots. I don't call any shots now. I think of myself as maintaining a background role. Shortly after Chris stepped into the presidency, the pandemic appeared. That has meant that what I might have expected to be doing, which would be to assist in hosting gatherings at our home and being in touch with the public generally, has not happened. But what I do is I do everything that I can to act as a spousal support for Chris. That means listening. For me, that's hard because I like to talk. But that doesn't work. It's taken me many years to learn this. What works is to listen, to be a pressure relief valve, to be a mirror, perhaps to ask questions, to help Chris think through and plan all of the activities that are entailed in the job of being the president. Not necessarily an enviable job. It never goes away. It's there all the time. It's there in the morning, it's there at midnight, it's there at 3 in the morning. So it kind of interweaves your personal life and your professional life. You become that role. And I have to just listen.
Well, John, I'm sorry that most of your authority has been taken away from you. But,
So Carol,
Well,
Carol,
at my advanced age, Carol, it's okay.
Sarah, I am going to say something about spousal role here, because Susan said, she was very careful about asking me at the end of the day, how was your day, or not asking me, but there was one day I came back from campus, and she said, well, how was everything? And I said, fine, everything was fine. She said, and a little bit later, she asked me, well, how was everything? Are you sure everything was fine? And I said, yeah, everything was fine. She said, well, to be quite honest, someone came up to me and told me that they saw you in your car, and this person was yelling at you and pointing and almost hitting you in the face and everything like that. And I said, that never happened. We had a consultant on campus, an architect, and he was saying we could build this over here, we could build this over there, and everything like that. And so Susan was very careful then about, you have to be careful about.
Said for a little while, I think, dear, something's happened, and I don't know what it is. So.
I was going to add a quick comment on something John said about the job never going away. We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and he pointed out to me it really never goes away. And I was kind of horrified when he pointed out, I mentioned this to Steve a few minutes ago, we can be driving to Iowa City. It's a weekend. We're going to brunch. We're going to go to the bookstore. We're going to go for a bike ride. And the whole drive up to Iowa City, I'm talking about Iowa Wesleyan the whole time, whether it's challenges or things I'm excited about. And I realized he was right, even on a summer vacation. It can take, I'm sure you both know this too, it can take an entire week just to get your head to stop thinking about it long enough to go into some other space for a while. But I realized how right he was, that I can be talking the entire time in the car, traveling, or it doesn't stop.
And I believe in a community the size of Mount Pleasant, the community members really expect the spouse to be active in things, entertaining, going to meetings, really being out and about. And you have to remember, presidents have far too many bosses. The board of trustees, they're the ones that hired them. They're the ones that can do the other thing to them. Then you have to work with the faculty, and most of the time they're great. At times, some of them get their nose out of joint a tad. And students, you never know what students are going to do. In student life, I was dean and vice president for 35 years, and I had reached a point where I thought, I've heard every excuse that any human being could come up with. And then it would make my day when some student would come in with some wild tale that I had never heard before, and we started all over again. So presidents have a lot of people to keep in contact with, and hopefully be able to please, not all the time. I always say, if everyone likes you, then you're not doing a very good job, because you always want someone that doesn't like you. That makes you think you're doing a much better job. Okay, let's move on. Can any of you, and you can go in any order you want to, think of any activity that you've been involved in, or any funny stories of what you've done, what a staff member has done, what a student has done, something ridiculous that happened on campus.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about anything ridiculous. Can I still say something? Just as an observation, a presidential spouse has the ability to observe. And when we first arrived, of course, the music department has always been this very special place, but the young choir director they had was not making progress with the choir, and it was, I think, within the second or third year that a new choir director came and turned all the people in that choir into the most amazing stars. And for me, it was an illustration of the power of a small private liberal arts college, and the power of one individual who was truly inspired to move mountains, bigger ones than I live on in Maryland. But the beauty of watching the transformation, and that happened in several places. I was talking to Bob about his mother, Mildred Bensmiller, who I talked to students of color that were poets because of her inspiration, and again the transformation. You'd meet young people in the freshman year, and the next semester their face looked different because it was like they got it. It's like they were ready to just grab life. And I give so many of these beautiful professors credit at a college like Iowa Wesleyan to make that change in somebody's life. So keep going. It's a worthy goal. One person can make all that difference.
Well, I think one of my, you wanted a humorous story, so I think one of my favorites is the day that the students organized a birthday party for Finnegan. Finnegan is our Irish wolfhound, and if he stands on his back feet, he's about 7 feet tall. The students threw a birthday party for him with cupcakes out on the green at lunchtime, and they invited other dogs, so faculty and staff and students could bring their dogs as well, and a few dogs showed up for the birthday party. And Finnegan was standing looking at the table of cupcakes, kind of ready to have one. And one of our staff members, he's not here anymore, but lots of you know him, Mike Heaton, showed up with his 2 dogs. He had, I think it was a black lab, and then he had a tiny little chihuahua, maybe even a mini chihuahua. It was really small. And they were off their leash, and they came running up. And Finnegan is a gentle giant. He would never hurt a soul. He's like a teddy bear. But the chihuahua ran up and surprised him. And I think he thought it might be a squirrel or something. And he turned around, and he picked it up. And so I'm standing there thinking, my dog is about to eat my colleague's dog. What am I going to do? And thankfully, Meg Richtman was standing next to me, and first Mike said to me, "Oh, don't worry, this happens all the time." And then Meg was standing next to them, and she just walked over to Finn, and he didn't even have his teeth. It was just, he kind of used his lips. He was very gentle, but Meg kind of opened his mouth and took this little tiny dog, and it was soaking wet, and she just kind of snuggled it. But I remember being just terrified that Finnegan was going to go against his normal character and swallow this tiny little dog. So thankfully that didn't happen.
Yeah, in terms of, I guess, I'm sure there were humorous things that occurred. Maybe I'm not remembering them. And actually what went through my mind was actually a profound moment. I think it was certainly profound, probably the most profound moment in my entire career happened right here. And I think it was a profound moment for us as a community. And it was in August of 2017. And it was the State of the University address. And that year we decided to combine the State of the University with the convocation. It was just a time in our country where racism was ugly and getting uglier in our country. Intolerance was just, it was not a good time for our country, and it concerned me, and it was making me reflect on, as a 21st century university, what's our role, what's our voice here in this public, sort of discourse. And so, so when we brought the convocation and the State of the University together, it was so that the students and the faculty, the staff, all of us could be together. And so in the remarks, my remarks is talking about that intolerance and really what the invitation, the opportunity for us as a university. And at that point, from 2013 to 2017, our students of color went from 13% to about 45%. We were a different campus, 4 years later. And so I was just speaking to that, and then in the midst of that, speaking to our African American students in particular, a student stood up. He was just right over here, actually. Karen, just right about behind you. And he was getting up and walking out, and I thought, well, that happens to me all the time when I'm talking. People walk out, get up and walk out, so I didn't think anything of it. Well, he didn't turn for the door, he turned for the stage. And he just kept coming. And then he hopped on the stage. And so really not knowing what was, going to happen, I just was saying to myself, I had no idea. My team was here on this, and I think they were ready to pounce. We don't have security like they have at the University of Iowa. And so this young man, Noah Ross, was a transfer student from Sacramento, California, African-American student. He came up and essentially just threw his arms around me. And he was just weeping inconsolably. And so I just held him, I don't know, Meg, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, which, is a long time there. And just weeping, and he just said to me, he thanked me and said, "No one has told me that my life matters before." He's 21. And in that moment, you could have and things were packed to the gills up top as well. And he changed us as a community in that moment. And it's a very emotional moment, but I think it was important for us as a community. It was important for me as a human. And he graduated 2 years later. And so I think it's a proud moment, but a really poignant and profound moment for us as a community, and certainly for me as part of the community at that time. That's what came to mind there.
Bill, were you going to say something, or?
No, it's all right.
Okay. John?
I'd like to say something very brief. Steve, I remember that moment. That happened probably only a month or two after I finally moved here from Vermont and settled into Mount Pleasant. I remember sitting out in front of the stage when that happened, and I was just stunned at that moment. I think many people were. That formed my impression of Iowa Wesleyan, and it continues to do so. A personal experience of mine, very small. I think most of my good memories are very small and very personal. A year or two after that, I'm not sure just how long, Martin Luther King Day rolled around, and I don't know whether she's present here or not. I don't have my glasses on, I can't see. Donna DuBose from the music faculty sang the African American national anthem. And I really respond to music. I love the music program at IW. I was just blown away by that. I just, had a catch in my breath as I was listening to that all the way through. And the same thing happens every year. And I look forward to it every year. That's one of the things I'll carry away with me.
Carol, I will add one. We had a delightful story of a young man named Gus that came in. First time he'd ever been in Mount Pleasant, first time he'd ever been on a train, came in from California to go to college here, play football. And, he came into this town and certainly not aware, not certain of where he was going, what he was going to do, how he was going to find people. And he was just overwhelmed with the genuine nature of Mount Pleasant and this campus and the faculty and the staff. And to see him mature and continue on in those 4 years was just phenomenal. So those type of things, to see the students being able to develop and move forward, and the faculty who took such great care and interest, not only in him, but the students on an individual basis, and encouraging them and motivating them. That's what it's all about, and it was a pleasure.
I would like to add to that too, and always so proud of the students here at Iowa Wesleyan and the people that you are, the good citizens that you are, and a really special, poignant, to use your word, example of that was, do you all remember several years ago when we had that big storm right as Old Threshers was getting ready, right? Yes, and the square was, the vendors had set up the night before, the storm comes through, and it's a mess. And then the parade route, the trees were down, and that was a mess. And our students prior to that, had always given a lot of volunteer service to Old Threshers, which is a wonderful thing. But do you remember that morning when we all went out and we cleaned up the square and we cleaned up the trees and we got ready because Old Threshers was coming, and it's a big deal, and it's a partnership that takes everybody in the community. I was so proud of our students for the way you said, this is our community too. It doesn't matter if I came from Australia or Chicago or just up the road. This is my home, and I'm going to take care. So thank you for being such wonderful humans and showing us how to take care of what we care for.
Yeah, the square was pretty purple that morning. Yeah.
Our time is beginning to run out on us, but I want to at least raise one more question. We need to keep in mind that while we have 2 former presidents and 1 current president, that many presidents came before them in our 180 years, and they've built on one thing that one accomplished, and then they continue to build on that, or they reverse and go another direction. There aren't many small colleges in the Midwest that can say they're celebrating their 180th birthday party, and all that have come before us, we need to be very appreciative of. My final question, because of time, is share with us what you think was the most important thing that you were able to do on the Iowa Wesleyan campus. What was your best accomplishment?
For us, and again, it was a community effort, total community effort, Carol. Stan and Helen Howe, when we were here, made a challenge of $15 million. They would give $15 million to the college if we could match it. And that effort took a few years, but we did it. And out of that, we were able to build the Nimitz Suites. We were able to renovate this facility. We were able to just create many other opportunities for students on campus. So that was probably a great opportunity and something that we're very pleased. And again, it was a community effort that we were just very pleased to be here at the time that it occurred.
That's a tough one in 15 seconds, Carol. It's I think what I am most proud of and appreciative of, it does go back to community. I think it is helping. I think it was inviting the entire region in to help us reimagine a new kind of institution for the region. So really helping to make Iowa Wesleyan the region's university of Southeast Iowa. And I think that it really became a point of pride, but we started thinking strategically together and then engaging that together. I mean, I think that would be and what that did is, the other thing is, I'm really proud of then the talent that attracted to come here. I mean, we would get calls from people wanting to be here, to work here, because of what was happening here. And I just think that shifted everything for us in terms of how we viewed ourselves and our place in the region and in the broader state. And I'm proud of that, and I'm proud that the very character of this place was really animated, I think, in a new way. And for those who might be relatively new to Iowa Wesleyan, I mean, the folks that have been here for a long time know this already, but folks that are relatively new, you have to understand that of the 4,000 institutions in this country, there are very, very, very few that have the character of this place, that have accomplished what this place has in the last, really over the last decade, last 8 years. It is absolutely extraordinary. And so the resolve and the character and the history of this place is really enduring. I mean, for us, it was the best 6 years of our career and of our lives, really in a large extent here, and to be a privilege to be a part of. You get a small part when you come in as president. You get a small part to play in a really long, dramatic history, and so to have that privilege to be able to do that, that's pretty golden. But we just can't. Never again will we underestimate our capacity to generate, to create, to add value into our region. That's the kind of place that this is.
I think for me, it's really taking a very serious look at who our students are, and really embracing that population of students, which is largely first-generation students. It's largely students of color, international students, low-income students, and creating a culture across the whole faculty and staff to say, we need to do everything we can to support this population of students and recognize what their needs are. And so developing our Student Success Center, which has now gone from 2 employees to 8, forming our partnership with Southeastern Community College, which is part of that work that Steve began, of how do we incorporate ourselves into the region more and provide economic development opportunities. And we're really becoming immersed in that right now. All the time we're developing new partnerships across the region. But I think for me, again, it's looking at who the students are and saying, as a culture, this is what we're going to do. We're going to support them with what they need. And everyone here embraces that, and I'm really proud of that.
Well, you've heard some history of Iowa Wesleyan this morning, and we know that this couldn't be accomplished just by the staff and faculty and students at Iowa Wesleyan, but the community for 180 years has supported Iowa Wesleyan in many, many ways, and I know that you'll continue to do so. You know, in the last 180 years, Iowa Wesleyan has sent many students and graduates out into the world, certainly not only the United States, but throughout the world. And when you leave Iowa Wesleyan, whether you left as a minister, a teacher, a business person, a farmer, a mother, a father, a businessman, you've been leaders within the community, and I see that continuing. Thank you for coming today. There will be some of us that won't be here for the 200th birthday party of Iowa Wesleyan, but I trust that some of you in the audience will plan to be back in 20 years to celebrate 200 years of Iowa Wesleyan. Again, thanks for coming. Have a good day, and the members of the panel will be around for a little while after we adjourn, before they go to lunch, if you want to visit with them. Thank you again for coming.